A woman fell from a plane at 33,330 feet with no parachute and walked out of the wreckage.
This isn't science fiction.
This happened on January 26, 1972, aboard a Yugoslav airliner, and the story of how Vesna Vulović survived is far stranger than the fall itself.
Vesna was born in Belgrade in 1950, a girl who dreamed of the world beyond Yugoslavia.
She loved the Beatles, hitchhiked through Europe as a teenager, and when her parents called her home from Sweden, terrified by tales of drugs and danger, she came back with a new plan.
She'd become a flight attendant. One of her friends looked so elegant in the uniform, had just returned from London for the day, and Vesna thought, why shouldn't I? So in 1971, she joined JAT, Yugoslavia's national airline.
She was 21 years old. Early in 1972, she was assigned to Flight 367, a routine run from Stockholm to Belgrade with stops in Copenhagen and Zagreb.
Nothing seemed unusual about it.
She and the crew arrived in Copenhagen on January 25, the morning before departure. They had the whole afternoon free. The other crew members wanted to go shopping, Vesna wanted to sightsee, but she gave in. Years later, she remembered something odd about that afternoon. The captain locked himself in his room for 24 hours, refusing to come out. At breakfast the next morning, the co-pilot talked about his son and daughter in a strange way, as if he needed to say their names one last time.
Vesna felt something was wrong, though no one spoke about it. They just seemed to know. The plane departed from Stockholm at 1:30 p.m. on January 26. It was a McDonnell Douglas DC-9, carrying 28 people total. When they landed in Copenhagen, Vesna watched the passengers and crew deplane. One man caught her attention. He seemed annoyed, agitated, almost anxious. Other crew members noticed him too.
The station manager noticed him. Then something very strange happened. This man never got back on the plane. He checked a bag in Stockholm, gotten off in Copenhagen, and simply disappeared. At 3:15 p.m., Flight 367 pushed back from Copenhagen and climbed into the sky. 46 minutes later, at 4:01 p.m., an explosion tore through the baggage compartment. The investigation would later confirm it was a briefcase bomb, possibly planted by that agitated man who'd vanished in Copenhagen. The aircraft didn't just catch fire or develop damage.
It broke apart mid-air.
The fuselage, the wings, the tail, the cockpit, all of it fragmented over a small Czechoslovak village called Srpska Kamenice.
28 people were on that plane. 27 of them fell from the sky.
Most of them were blown out when the cabin depressurized, their bodies tumbling through thousands of feet of freezing air before impact.
The 28th person was Vesna.
She was found by a villager named Bruno Honky, buried in the wreckage, screaming. Her turquoise flight attendant's uniform was soaked in blood. Her high heels had been torn off.
By every rational measure, she should have been dead. But Bruno Honky had been a medic in World War II. He knew how to keep someone alive.
He stayed with her until the rescuers came. What Vesna didn't know, what no one would fully understand for weeks, was the incredible coincidence of physics and biology that had saved her life. Investigators later discovered that as the aircraft broke apart, a food trolley from the cabin became lodged against Vesna's body, pinning her inside a section of the fuselage. When that section broke free from the wreckage and fell, it didn't fall straight down. It tumbled and angled as it descended through 6.5 miles of air. When it finally struck the ground, it hit at an angle in a heavily wooded, snow-covered mountainside.
The trees and snow cushioned the impact.
And Vesna, due to her chronically low blood pressure, had passed out as soon as the cabin lost pressure. The lower oxygen and her medical condition saved her from the G-forces that would have stopped her heart on impact. She'd fainted at just the right moment. The world's most unlikely miracle. But the fall itself wasn't what nearly killed her.
It was what came next.
Vesna spent days in a coma, her skull fractured, her brain bleeding internally. Both her legs were broken. 3 vertebrae were broken, one of them crushed completely. Her pelvis was fractured. Several ribs shattered.
When she finally woke, she couldn't feel anything below her waist.
The doctors told her family she'd never walk again.
She remembered nothing. The last thing in her mind was greeting passengers as they boarded in Copenhagen.
The next thing was opening her eyes in a hospital to see her parents, a month later.
She underwent surgery after surgery.
First, she could only move her left leg. Weeks later, her right leg followed. Within 10 months, something almost impossible happened. Vesna walked. Not easily, her spine was permanently twisted from the impact, and she would limp for the rest of her life, but she walked. Her doctors were shocked. When journalists asked her how she'd done it, she said it was Serbian stubbornness, and a childhood diet of chocolate, spinach, and fish oil. Yugoslavia embraced her as a national hero. Yugoslav President Tito honored her personally. A folk singer recorded a song about her. The villager who found her, Bruno Honky, had a granddaughter born 6 weeks after the crash. He named her Vesna. But there was something strange about Vesna's celebrity. When she asked to return to work as a flight attendant, JAT Airways refused. They said her presence would create too much publicity. Instead, they gave her a desk job negotiating freight contracts, pushing papers instead of boarding planes. And she was fine with it. She had no fear of flying because she had no memory of the crash. She took regular flights. Other passengers recognized her, wanted to sit next to her, asked her about that day. In 1985, the Guinness Book of World Records officially recognized her as the survivor of the highest fall without a parachute. She received the honor at a London gala from Paul McCartney himself. But her life after the crash was not the fairy tale the world imagined. She married a mechanical engineer named Nikola Brica in 1977, only to discover that despite what doctors said about her injuries, she couldn't have children. Her ectopic pregnancy nearly killed her. In the early 1990s, her marriage fell apart. She smoked constantly, a habit her husband couldn't accept. And then something darker happened. When she spoke out against Serbian dictator Slobodan Milosevic during the breakup of Yugoslavia, when she joined anti-government protests, JAT fired her. She was fired quietly, pushed into early retirement with a poor pension, but never arrested. The government didn't dare arrest her. The negative publicity would have been too great. The national hero had become an embarrassment. But there's one last mystery that haunts this story. While Vesna was recovering in the 1970s, the man who called himself a Croatian nationalist took credit for the bombing. But he was never arrested. The investigation found explosives, confirmed a briefcase bomb, and pinpointed Croatian émigré groups as suspects. In the decades that followed, no one was ever charged. No one was ever prosecuted. No one ever answered for that explosion that killed 27 people and sent one woman falling from the heavens. Vesna herself became a dissident, a protester, a victim of the regime she'd once symbolized. She died alone in her Belgrade apartment on December 23, 2016, having spent her final years isolated and struggling with survivor's guilt. The only question that remained unanswered was why she alone had been chosen to survive.